I'm here because I'm going to make a sweet tart dough. And the recipe that I'm using comes from the cookbook Tartine by Elizabeth Pruitt and Chad Robertson. And they own a bakery in San Francisco called Tartine, and they have 4 cookbooks now, I think. But this sweet tart dough is really interesting because the recipe is actually a French one. It's called a pâté sablé. That's not how you say it, I'm sure, in real French. But it's interesting because it uses room temperature butter and room temperature eggs. And usually when you're making the crust of a tart or a pie, you always try and get the fat as cold as you can so that it will go in between the layers of the flour and the dough, so that then you have the really flakiness. But I'm really interested in this as well. I've made it once before, but it was long enough ago that I can't remember how it turned out, except that it was too thick, because it says that it only takes about 13 minutes to cook, and I think mine was like 25 minutes to cook. I think I stuffed it all in the pan too much, so that because I didn't want to have it like an awkward amount left over. So I'm going to make the sweet tart dough, and then after that I'll make some different fillings that we can put in it. So you start out with a cup of sugar, and you add the butter, which is 1 cup, so 2 cubes of butter plus 2 tablespoons. So I had forgotten actually to get my butter out when I got my eggs out to get it to room temperature, so I just put it in the microwave for like 15 to 20 seconds and felt it and made sure that it was smooth and soft. Also, just so you know, the reason why they like everything to be the same temperature with the eggs and the butter is that it makes it easier for it to combine. And then it says to add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And I'm just going to put in a tiny bit like that because I'm using salted butter. I like the way salted butter tastes in most things better than unsalted. Plus sometimes my kids will accidentally get out the unsalted butter, and then everyone says, why does my toast taste disgusting? Why is that? There's something wrong with this butter. And so it's like, yes, that's because it's unsalted. So we're just putting that in the mixer, and we're going to mix it until smooth. So you can see that the butter and sugar has all come together. Now, one great thing about this dough is that it says that it behaves well. And so that means that it bakes beautifully, it holds its shape without slumping down into the tart pan, which, as you know, if you've ever tried to pre-bake a pie crust and it's kind of, shrunk on you, that's super frustrating. So they say that and also it says that it can be rolled out multiple times without losing the quality, which is another way that it's different from other types of tart dough. So this looks pretty smooth to me. So now I'm going to just scrape down the sides. Now, room temperature eggs, if you've never tried to make cookies with room temperature eggs, it all works out so much better because then the eggs and the butter mix together better. So we're scraping down the sides, and we're going to add 1 of our 2 eggs right now. Okay. And I'm just going to mix that. Hopefully, it might turn kind of curdy because that's a little bit of what happens when you mix that in. Let's see how this goes. It doesn't look too bad. Okay, now I'm going to add 1 more room temperature egg, so that's a total of 2 eggs. So thus far, I've added a cup of butter with 2 tablespoons of butter, and then 1 cup of sugar, a little bit of salt, and now we're adding our second egg in there. So, and it's mix it until it is smooth. I think I'm going to stop that and scrape down the sides. It kind of got a little bit of a layer on there so that all of it can be mixed in together. This is such an interesting way to do a tart dough, don't you think? Be interested to see how this comes together if I do it really thin this time. It makes me really sad. I actually had bought like cute tiny little tart pans that had removable bottoms. But then when I was moving, I thought, I will never use these. And so then I gave them away. And now I wish I had them. Okay, so that looks like that's pretty well mixed in. Now we're going to add the flour. And so we'll just put that, make sure we have the around the bottom there. And we're adding all the flour at once. And it is 3 1/2 cups of flour. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. And I always kind of like to err on the side of less, just because when you're working with a dough, you're going to probably be rolling it out. So there's a half. So you're going to be adding more flour then. Also, this dough, after we're done mixing it, we're going to shape it into 4 balls and put it in the fridge for at least 2 hours before we cook it. And so that'll give it time to firm up, and that'll make it easier to roll, even if it's a little bit stickier. So I'll just turn this on a little bit more. Mix on low speed just until it's incorporated. And you can see it's kind of coming together. I like it to do kind of the work for me. There we go. That looks perfect. So now I just am going to spread a little bit of flour on my counter to dump this out. And okay, so we scraped it, scraping it all out. Just dumping it on the counter here. Make sure you get all of it. So let's see. Scrape it off. Okay, so now try and figure out the best way to get this into 4 even balls. And let's see. So let's see if we make it kind of a log thing like that. Does that look somewhat similar in shape? So then we can cut it in half. Look about in half, and then in half again, and in half again. My husband would get out the thing to weigh it. This looks definitely smaller, but we'll just make a smaller tart with that one. So I'll wrap these in saran wrap. And I think it's easier if you make them kind of round like that. And then they're easier to roll out once it's been refrigerated. So we'll come back in 2 hours. Okay, so our dough has been in for a couple hours, and I already rolled out the one that I was going to use for the lemon tart, but I haven't cut out and trimmed the edges yet, but that one didn't get recorded, so instead I'll roll out this one. And it actually is a pretty easy to work with dough. And what it did say is don't stretch the dough if it starts thawing, because that's what will make it so that it will shrink if you stretch it versus just rolling it out like this. So I normally like to roll out dough between parchment when I'm doing pies and things like that. But this one said it was easy to work with, so that's why I am taking a chance with just having the flour on here. I need to add a little bit more on here. So I don't have a pie or a tart pan per se. I just have a just a regular pan, but I think any pan that you are making a tart in, it would just count as being a tart pan, right? So, because you made a tart in it. All right, this piece, I don't know if it's big enough for what I was gonna do. So maybe we'll cut off, you're supposed to roll it to 1/8 inch thickness. So what I think we'll do is I'll cut off this. Okay, so I'm just taking it from out of there because they said it doesn't matter how many times you roll the dough out. And it actually is getting pretty soft pretty quick. I had thought that I would not need to refrigerate it like it said, because I thought, oh, that's just a big huge hassle to refrigerate it for another 15 minutes to like reset the dough. But I think I actually will do that because it got pretty soft just being out here this long. So there we go. Let's see, how does this look? Pull this off. Oh, this needs to be trimmed. There we go. All right, so let's see if that, I might want to put some pieces right there just so that it won't leak through. And one of the other tips that the person had, the Tartine cookbook has, is it said in order to make the crust stay crisp for longer is that you get an egg and you whisk it with some salt, and then you brush it on the tart shell before you bake it, and then that just creates an extra layer of the protection for the crust. Okay, so let's see. So I just added those to this one that I have right here. Now this will be a trick to get it off of my counter because it will probably be a big huge mess. So let's see. So here's the pan that I was going to use. Oh, and it looks like that will be a good size. So I'm just going to use this to kind of scrape up, because I don't know that I was that good about the flour situation. Let's see. But I mean, what I really like is when you can use different techniques and different ways that you wouldn't normally think. So that's why this warm room temperature butter, I guess I should say, room temperature butter and egg mixture just was super interesting to me, because I thought, how will that work? So those pieces came off. Let's see, we'll just kind of flip these over and put this in here like this. Bring that over. And I know I am not a professional, as I like to say, but you kind of like lift it up and set it down inside of the pan like that. Now I've heated up the oven to 325 degrees. I've done it, I set it at 350 because I have convection, and when I do convection, for some reason it goes down 25 degrees. So I set it up to 350, so it would be a 325 degree oven, and then it says to cook it for about 13 minutes until it looks done. Now we're going to dock it, so let's see. I think I will just go along and cut along here like this to make it have a beautiful clean edge. And of course, docking is when you get a fork and you poke holes all in the crust. So what we're going to do now is I wonder if that is 1/8 inch thick, because like I've mentioned before, I'm not very good with knowing if things are the right thickness or not. So let's see. Just kind of want to make sure that if there anywhere that looks like it might have a hole, and that, I mean, you can kind of tell where I had put the used pieces, but I think it looks nice. So we've got these two crusts, and I'm going to get a fork to dock this. And I'm going to get an egg out. Okay. There we go. I think this is very cool looking. And so I'll put these in. Oh, and I forgot to do the egg. Let me get Okay, so I'm just doing a pinch with a large egg here. I'm just going to whisk this up. Alright, so this thin coating is supposed to seal the shell, and it'll keep the crust thicker for longer. Okay. Alright, so now I'll just put this on here, because you know soggy crust is never good. I'm not a huge fan of that at all. I think it's super gross. I'm not a fan of like raw cookie dough or raw anything. My husband thinks I'm un-American because I do not like that. But okay, so that'll create that glaze on there that we are looking to see.